Welcome to Lieven and Marcelo's Criminology podcast, a podcast hosted by Marcelo Aevi from the University of Lausanne, Switzerland, and Lieven Pauwels from Ghent University, Belgium. We aim to draw a map of the state of criminology across Europe through the words of contemporary criminologists. How is criminology defined and taught? Which are the main lines of research? Which are the main schools of thought in each country? These and many other questions are answered here by fellow researchers who share their vision on the development of criminology in their countries from its beginnings to the second decade of the 21st century. If you want to know and compare their stories, stay tuned.
Today we are interviewing Elena Larrauri. Elena Larrauri is Professor of Criminal Law and Criminology at the Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, in Spain. She is past president of the European Society of Criminology. Her research interests are, among others, prison systems, criminal records, community sentences, and the gendered analyses of criminal justice systems. She is a founding member of the Criminology and Criminal Justice System Research Group. She has been the head of the Department of Law in the Universitat Pompeu Fabra and director of the Master Program in Criminology. This interview was conducted on the 20th of December 2022.
Welcome, Elena Larrauri, to Lieven and Marcelo's Criminology podcast.
Welcome, Elena Larrauri, and we are very pleased to have you here in our podcast. I suggest that we will just start by asking you the first and probably the most difficult question to answer, and that is the question related to how you would define criminology as it exists in Spain.
So, well, first, thank you for having me. It is a great pleasure. It gives me the opportunity to reflect on criminology in Spain. And I imagine that once you have the map of Europe, it will be very interesting to compare the different answers from different countries in Europe. So thank you very much. Yeah, you asked me to define criminology as it exists. So in order to begin the story of criminology in Spain, I have to put first the time, a year. So I will say I will begin by 1980s. Okay, because of course, if I go to 1800 or 1920s, this would be a different history, a different story, which I wouldn't know that much. So I'll begin in 1980s, because this is when I think that criminology begins in Spain. It begins, we have to take into account two names, which are, I think, very important. And those two names is one from Argentina, that's Roberto Bergali, and one from Chile, which is Juan Bustos. I don't know why. I mean, we would have to ask our South American colleagues why, but in South America, criminology was somehow closer to criminal law, or at least those two professors that were in exile in the University of Barcelona, they were never the typical criminal lawyers. You know, they could have been typical criminal lawyers in the sense of only criminal law, but they were not. They tended to be open to social sciences, sociology of law, criminology. You know, it wasn't very, very clear, but at least they were open to social sciences. So this is 1980s, and each in their own way, Roberto Bergali, exiled from Argentina, Juan Bustos, exiled from Chile, they begin to do seminars. You know, they begin to say, we're going to read a book and we're going to discuss it. You know, and there's this group of young scholars who tend to surround them. Okay, so this, in 1980s then, I tend to explain to my European colleagues that for us, the only textbook in Spain was the New Criminology. I mean, we had no other textbook. Again, I don't know why, but the new criminology was translated, I think, in Argentina.
Yes, Amoror
Right?
Editores.
Amoror.
Yeah.
So, because it was translated into Spanish, we see this book, The New Criminology, and for us, this is the criminology. I mean, so we begin to read this book, and then we begin to, engage a little bit in criminology, a little bit, as I say, through those two influences that really come from South America. So this is the first step we have. What we liked of that criminology was that it was sociological, right? I mean, it had a little bit of sociology. It was critical in a broad sense. It was leftist, progressive. I mean, you have to take into account that we're coming out of a dictatorship in Spain. So the criminology we want to do is very much sociological, is very much leftist, liberal, critical, and also it is English. And those three characteristics are the exact opposite to what criminal law was, because criminal law was very close in itself, very formal. It had an air of being conservative, and it was German. It was German oriented. So, criminology was, as I say, it was English oriented, it was sociological, and it was more leftist. So in the 80s, that was what doing criminology in Spain would mean. As I say, being more social sciences oriented, being more to England, and being more leftist. This is up to some point a caricature, because of course in criminal law there were leftist people, but mostly were German oriented. And some of them were a little bit more open to other influences, but most were very formal law analysis. So this is how criminology begins in Spain in the 80s.
Before we leave this, it's not an accident, I think, if both were in Catalonia, or maybe it was an accident they were both in Barcelona, but this, in my opinion, has an influence on the development of criminology, especially in Catalonia, because I'm not sure about the influence of these two professors outside of Catalonia. What do you think?
You might be right. I mean, you might be right. Both were in Catalonia, so actually the influence, probably they had some, because I mean, to me, sometimes it happens that I read, say, a paper of some oldie, so to say, and I see that they cite Bergali, and I think, oh, okay, so they knew him. But I think you're quite right, that their influence was more in Catalonia, in Barcelona, and through Barcelona a little bit to the rest, although both were well known. I mean, both had, as I say, both came from the exile.
Yeah.
I mean, so even the liberal criminal lawyers were sympathetic to them. I mean, Bergali didn't reach a professorship, so you could say that his career was a little bit interrupted. But Bustos got a professorship. I mean, Bustos was really well known in the rest of Spain. I mean, but more as criminal lawyer. This is true, because he was, after all, a criminal lawyer.
Yeah.
So and this is the 80s. Yeah.
And maybe one hypothesis that we developed discussing with Jose Cid, with Pepe, is that in particular Luis Jimenez de Azua, when he was forced to leave Spain after the dictatorship, because I discovered that he was even the president of the Republic in exile until his death.
Okay, yeah.
And so he went to Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
He was at the University of Buenos Aires. And I think this is, I'm not sure, this I have to set hypothesis, but it could be a history of exiled people. Jimenez de Azua bringing some ideas of criminology to Argentina, where already Ingenieros was there, because Ingenieros was of Italian origin and had a link with Italy and also with Switzerland, because he studied here. But then I wonder if it was not this influence that also, because Basigalupo, another Argentine that went to exile, I know that Bacigalupo studied with Luis Jimenez de Azu. I don't know the other two, but I don't know.
Not Bustos, but maybe Vergali did.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, what is true is that I'm sure that we get into criminology through those two, Argentina and Chile. I'm sure of that. And I'm sure it begins here in Catalonia, you know.
Yeah.
So from here, then it expands. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
and also, before leaving the 80s, one more thing. It is also in the 80s that Barcelona started the victimization survey, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Do you have any idea how this idea of conducting a victimization survey came to take place? Because it's not the line of Vergali and Bustos. Eh?
No. Let's finish the line of Vergali and Bustos. But you're right. You're right. You're right in putting it. But the line of Vergali and Bustos really exhausts itself in teaching criminology in the law faculties. You know, I mean, because neither Vergali nor Bustos have the knowledge or the resources to do research or to begin a big group. I mean, their influence, which is not small, is to say, we want to put a subject of criminology in the law departments. You know, so this is their influence. Then what you mentioned of the victimization survey, you're right, it's in the 80s. I can't speak for the strict origins, but I really can tell you the anecdote that at least when I get to know this survey, the victimization survey, this comes through the new criminology. Through the new criminology in their second phase, when they're doing victimization surveys in Islington.
Exactly.
Because it's the time when we discover that crime is suffered mainly also by working class and by the communities, you know. So I'm not sure if this is the origin, but I'm sure it is a very big influence, because I remember going with the city hall to Islington to learn. Really? Yeah.
And which was your link there with the city hall?
Yes, this is also funny. But let me tell you one thing, because in one of those strips, I'll tell you which was my link. But in one of those strips is when I'm having a beer in a pub with the guy from the city hall, and I say, we need to put together all the people that do criminology in Spain. And the next year we organize a first meeting of all the criminologists in Spain in the city hall in Barcelona. And this is the origin of the Spanish Society of Criminology.
And which year is that? Do you remember?
Not much, but 1982, 1984, 1986.
Incredible, yeah.
The thing is that when Rosemary Barberet, who reconstructs the story but doesn't know these previous origins, so she begins with the official date, which is, I don't know, 88, 89. But it comes before, and it comes from the influence of the city hall through the victimization studies. So it's very good that you pointed this out, because I had forgotten it, but you're right. Okay, how do I get the link with the city hall? Because in 82, when I finished law, I get through Bustos, they have recently created the Catalan police. And they asked me if I want to go and teach classes to the first promotion of Catalan police. And I say, yes, okay. And the director of the Catalan police is a very strong woman called Paz Molina. I haven't seen her since, but she's very strong, very powerful. And she has links with the city hall. So she's the one that will be the director of the police school and the one that will develop the victimization service. And the one that helped me create this first meeting for the Society of the Spanish Criminology. As I say, I'm not sure if that is zero. I would have to ask, other people. But at one point, I'm sure there's influence of the English criminology, Islington Council. Also, Marcelo, there are two people in sociology called Julie Sabaté and Marta Ragay. I mean, they are also, probably they go to also doing victimization surveys. I mean, if you come from sociology, this is a quite natural point. So although they didn't define themselves as criminologists and they didn't do anything else and never came to any meeting, but maybe that was also the link.
Yeah, I didn't know at all this link between Barcelona and Islington, but then, I mean, okay, it's a correlation, but there must be something there.
No. We went many times, and Islington came many times, you know, because the city hall had created a specific unit that had to study social prevention and crime prevention. And yeah, why did we go to Islington? Maybe because I got to know the new criminologist. We had an Erasmus master, remember? We had an Erasmus master. Yeah, that also. Jesus, the memory. I'm remembering it all now. We had an Erasmus master, and in the Erasmus master, there's Jog Young, Islington, Barata, Hulsman, Rotterdam. Rotterdam. Maybe somebody else, but I'm missing. Okay, those were the three, but I mean, there's a link, victimization surveys, Islington, City Hall of Barcelona, and from there comes the first meeting of the Society of the Spanish. A person that has more memory and that was there in the first meeting already also was Santiago Redondo.
Okay, but you see how, so what we are doing is interviewing different persons from the same country, because the only way to reconstruct the story is like this, you know, and then the second time or the third time, I know already something, but this, for example, this link I never heard before, this link with Islington in particular, the city where Young conducted his studies. And this, it was already called Erasmus at that time, because that is the 80s already, it's before the European Union, or maybe it's 86 when Spain entered the European Union.
I went to the States 86, 87. And when I came back 87, 88, this master already existed. It was done, as I say, probably it was the first Erasmus experience. Huh?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I mean, you're saying 87, 88. And I got here from the States and they take me to a meeting and they say, this is the Erasmus and there is Barata, Jog Young. I mean, the neo-realists or I don't know how to call them. The neo-realists, Barata, Hulsman with his abolitionism. I hadn't explained the link had you not asked about victimization surveys.
Yeah. No, I mean, okay. Sometimes we're lucky with the questions, and so now I see it more clearly. And but that was, you were at the Autonomous University of Barcelona, eh?
Yeah.
And who made the link then with? Do you know who made the link with the Young? It was Bustos.
Bustos Vergali. At that point, it was always Bustos Vergali, Bustos. At that point, there had been no how do you call big crack? At that point, both were friends, so it was. Then there was a big schisma. How do you say it in English?
Schism.
Yeah. At that point, I'm not sure if they connected Vergali or Bustos. As I say, I was in the States. I was in Santa Barbara. It was just lucky that at that time I was in Santa Barbara getting introduced to criminology.
By the sea.
Yeah,
nice.
Exactly. So at that point, I'm learning Cressy. You know, I go to the office and I see Cressy. It's like seeing, if you like movies, it's like seeing John Ford.
He was still there when you were.
Yes, he was in his office. You know?
You met him. I didn't know that.
Cressy, yes. Cressy was there. Tom Sheff was there. You know, becoming mentally ill or something like this. Tom Sheff was there. Dario Melosi was there. Wow. You know, so it was. You know, everybody wanted to be in Santa Barbara in the winter. Who is the other man? Richard Cloward was there. You know,
also,
and all this. Yeah, he was there. I mean, many people were there. So I was getting introduced. When I come back here, they say we're doing this Master Erasmus. So I go to the meeting, and there is Bustos Vergali, Jog Young, Barata.
Okay, now you understand. And
that's the end of the 80s. That's right, because that's 88, 90,
Young had already moved from the new criminology, from the 1973, but he didn't have an influence because Barata publishes in 1982, and his book does not take into account that. He's still a little bit in 73, and I don't have the impression that Bergali, I know Les Bustos, never enter into that kind of empirical things, and the discourse remained more close to the one of the 70s. Am I wrong?
You might be right. I mean, when I say this, I usually get blamed by colleagues. You're not supposed to say this. Okay, I'm not supposed to say that. But I always think there's a gap because all what's published in English, it's not always easy to read immediately. So there's always a gap, I mean, so then until, it gets to be read, worked, published in Spanish, and then it's like, okay, we acknowledge it. So I would think that this is maybe the reason why, the working class criminology does not have an impact in the first years. It doesn't have an impact until 90s.
It's quite impressive how in the Spanish-speaking world, the translation is so important. And it's very selective what is translated. It's a lot of ideological preferences, which I understand because you live with this book. I mean, it's like having a relationship with the book. You are there for 1 year translating. So if you do not like it, but for the people learning criminology, it can be sometimes really complicated because you get access only to one thing. And usually, as you mentioned, because that is the truth, it arrives usually late. The new criminology is translated in 77, so 4 years later. And working class criminology, I'm not even sure it is translated.
It got translated in one of those black books that was called Critical Criminology, but it was translated very late also.
Okay. Yeah.
I should have it, but I don't have it. Those books disappear. I don't, But I want to tell you one thing of the translations. What you say is totally true. I wanted to insist that when we begin criminology, we just have one book, the New Criminology, and this is because it's translated. I didn't know Walt Bernard or Akers or, I didn't know anything of this. I mean, I thought there was one book,
Yeah. And this is a major thing because it shapes it can shape a generation. It shapes the generations. And so it's only the ones that, well, then you went to the States, but at the beginning it's quite complicated and for the people that do not have access to English, and now, of course, it's easier to get the books, but at that time, it had a strong influence on what was going on. And I mean, the Spanish-speaking world is currently 500 million people. So I think it's also that if you belong to a minority language, you are sometimes always forced to learn English. But with the language, but maybe it's an hypothesis that is so important, then your approach to the foreign languages is different.
But also it's what we were saying. I mean, now I think it has changed a lot because getting books is easier. People learn more English. But again, remember what I told you, that if you were in law, you had to learn German. I had to learn German. I went to do my PhD in Göttingen. I mean, it was like...
you were in Göttingen. You were not at the Max Planck. Nice.
I went to Max Planck, but to learn German. I went to learn German in Freiburg, Max Planck. But then to do my PhD, I went to Göttingen.
And who was there at that time?
You won't know him, but he was a professor called Wolfgang Schöne. Wolfgang Schöne was because he wrote very little, but he was a Schuler of Hans Wilson. But what I'm trying to say is that English was not that common. I mean, now it begins to be more common.
Yeah.
But in criminal law, still, when you do a commission and a tenure track or whatever, it's difficult to find a criminal lawyer that speaks English.
And just out of curiosity, so you went to Göttingen, and your Martingale was not there yet. He arrived later. No, because I think he arrived later.
I was there for my PhD, so that's middle 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
There was somebody from criminology, but it was like Schleiser or whatever. But I was, in that moment, I was in criminal law.
in criminal law.
No,
Yeah.
I wasn't.
Okay.
One thing, when we finished the 80s, which we have finished a little bit now, and then I go to Santa Barbara. By the way, I forgot. How can this happen? Who was in Santa Barbara? Stanley Cohen.
Who made the introduction to your book?
Yes,
of course.
because I translated his book. I translated Visions of Social Control.
Of course.
Yeah, we had forgotten.
Because
Okay.
in your introduction to your book, you mentioned the Mittagessen.
That is in Frankfurt. Okay, my book has two moments. My book, I didn't know Stanley Cohen. I met Stanley Cohen in Santa Barbara. And I don't know if you have never met him or seen him, or then it is hard to exaggerate, but Stanley Cohen was something you would, adore. He was intelligent, well-read, balanced, extremely funny, so it was like, it was like really, really, very, very nice man, very culto, very read, I had read a lot, sociology and that. Okay, so that's the first part of, I translate his book, Visions of Social Control, and I tell him, okay, I'm in Santa Barbara, what can I do? And he says, why don't you write a paper about abolitionism? And I say, okay, I'll write a paper about abolitionism and decarceration, okay. And when I finish, I tell him, but how does it go on? From where does all this come? And then I engage in a series of interviews with him, because he's read so much that this comes from here. But from where comes this from here? This comes from 50 years ago. This comes from 100 years ago. So I have to read Merton, Parsons, Mead, and I never finish. So then what I do is I go to Jerusalem 6 months.
To Jerusalem?
Yes, I went to Jerusalem 6 months because I needed to work with him. I needed to exprimir, to
take the juice. Take out the juice.
I mean, when I look at this now at my age, I think, how come this man tolerated me? Because it was like once a week, he would be with me like 3-4 hours with pages and pens. And this comes from where? And this comes from where? And this comes, I think he must have thought, who is this crazy mad person who has gone to Jerusalem? It's like, okay, but I was 6 months. But I didn't finish the book because, as I say, he took me always, So then I applied for a scholarship and I got the Humboldt. And then I go to Frankfurt. And in Frankfurt, I am supposed to do criminal law, which a little bit I do. I do justification and excuses. I do a little bit of that with Hassemer. But im Grunde genommen, I'm finishing my criminology book.
Wow.
Which I finished. I finished the book, I'm not sure, when is that? 1992, maybe? 1991?
Yeah, it's published in 1991. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's because I needed more time. I mean, what began as a paper on abolitionism and decarceration, as I say, took me to the neo-deviance theory. Okay. So that's, I had to read the 80s and the 70s. But as I say, he said, oh, but you have to read Matza. And then I had to read Matza. Matza is great. It can be, I still have all my notes from the Institute of Jerusalem, all my notes. When they stopped me in the airport in Jerusalem, they said, where have you been? And I said, in the Institute studying. Do you have any proof? And I could take those pages with all my summaries of Matza.
But that's fantastic. I mean, and it shows that you really need to read all the originals yourself, because it's so dangerous to read textbook versions. It's full of mistakes. And if you read the originals, you can reconstruct the history yourself. You have a much better understanding. I love this story.
Yeah.
It's an example of how you should.
It's incredible.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I agree that it's probably true what you say always, because sometimes when you read a summary, as I said, it's like a caricature.
Yeah.
So it's probably true always. But in the case of matzah, I think it's like, I mean, unless you read matzah, it's like, it's like, no, it's like a little bit like Sykes, Sykes, the pains of imprisonment, If I hear one more time the pains of imprisonment, I think I'm going to faint, but once you read it, it's so interesting, but if you read the summary, you say, oh, this is so banal,
You need to read the originals.
Yeah. So
this line is quite interesting because, as you know, so you published the book in 1991. Then I started studying criminology in 1994, and my parents go to Barcelona in 1994, and I told them, just get me a book go to a library and get me a book on criminology, because I only have some ideas from Buenos Aires, and it was and they brought your book. They brought your book, and that is how in 1994 I discovered your work when I was starting studying criminology.
Look, can you see the...
Wow, yes, the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
Great.
I didn't know this part of the story.
And
so
it's Becoming Deviant, David Matza. And look at the summary, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me count. Okay, so it has 13. It has 13 pages. I could read you and explain you Becoming Deviant by Matza. I was a great fan of Matza.
He's still very influential. Many people don't know Matza nowadays, but if you read all the contemporary theories, many of them refer or have taken ideas, some even without knowing.
I know. This was one anecdote that this man, Wolfgang Schöne in Germany, used to tell me, is he said he wrote very little, and he was very criticized because he wrote so little. And he used to tell me, my problem is that I've read too much. And I could see the irony, because it's like, if you've read a lot, you think, oh, but he's said it already. But that was already said by that one, and that, another one said it. What am I going to say, So I guess that in order to write at one point, you really have to say, okay, let's write,
Stop and try to integrate and make something new out of it.
No, but it's quite impressive that you still have your notes and you can find them easily. So you were well organized since that moment.
But because that's the only one I had, and because since
I don't believe you. You have more, I'm sure.
I have more. But since it had this, it became like sort of like,
So it's quite interesting to see this. And so you finish your PhD, and then when you got this, you take things seriously, because the moment they told you that you were going to do criminology is when you start going to the States.
I finished my PhD in criminal law. I go to the States. At that point in life, if you go to the States in 87, 88, it was very difficult to do criminal law, or at least I didn't know how to do it. So then I said, okay, I'm going to do criminology. And then I began doing criminology, which was quite, And when I came back, I'm still a little bit in criminal law, because as you see, I applied for a Humboldt.
Yeah.
So, I go again back to Germany, and because in Spain, I'm very aware that if you want to do a career in Spain, you will not do it unless you are in criminal law.
Yeah.
So, so I say I do criminology, but I do criminal law and criminology. Yeah. So then I get the Humboldt. I go to Germany. I'm in Germany almost 2 years, with Hassemer, which was very fortunate because Hassemer was also great. And then when I come back, I finally get my tenure.
Okay, I see. So it was Santa Barbara first, and then when you come back from Santa Barbara, they tell you that they are having this Erasmus program.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of synchronicity.
Yeah, I agree.
Because you decided to study criminology, and when you come back, there is something opening there. Okay, Jung
yeah.
is laughing somewhere.
But something opening is only the Master Erasmus, because as you realize, that's 88, 89. And then in order to promote my career, I still have to apply for the Humboldt and go to Germany. I mean, if I had not gotten the Humboldt and gone to Germany until 92 with Hassemer and his umbrella and his support, I'm not sure if I would have gotten tenure. Huh?
Okay.
I get tenure because I have this. I mean, I cannot be swept so easily because I also speak German. I also did my PhD, parts of it in Germany. I had the Humboldt. So yes, okay, I'm a little bit weird because I also went to the States, but I defend myself in criminal law.
Yeah.
And actually, after the Humboldt, my exercise, what you would call habilitación in German, is, I can't even translate this, but it's la imputación objetiva del delito. I can't even translate it. La imputación objetiva means, how to answer if a result is causally related to the action.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow. Yeah.
If I throw a stone and the stone goes like this and somebody dies, la imputación objetiva del resultado. So this is my tenure after going to Santa Barbara. So as you see, I'm doing criminology and criminal law.
Yeah.
Because or else I wouldn't get the tenure.
Yeah, but this is a very important piece of information about the profile or at least at that time, the profile of the persons who are teaching criminology maybe didn't change a lot, but we will arrive there. So, okay, so now
we are 90s.
The 90s, yeah.
90s is criminology begins to be more and more, a lot of teaching, but it's not official until there's a big gap because it's not official until 2000. So you would say that it begins at the end of the 80s, but it takes like 10 years of teaching until in the 2000s, 2003, 2004, 2006, it becomes officially established as undergraduate programs. 10 years of teaching, but it's not an official degree.
By official, you mean like a national degree? Because if I remember correctly, there was already also in Barcelona a degree in criminology, but it was called título propio, something given by the university.
Yeah, that's what I mean, that it doesn't have the official stamp of being an acknowledged study.
Yeah, to understand this, one must know that Spain is a very centralized country in some things, because, for example, in Switzerland, the degrees, and I suppose that in Belgium is the same, but you can correct me later, Lieven, each university gives its degrees, and there is not a national authority that validates the degrees given by, it's not that I'm going to teach law, I send it to the Ministry of Justice. We don't have ministries, but it's the same function, but with a different name, and they have to approve it. While in Spain, it is like that.
Yeah.
You have a local and a national validation, no?
Yeah. No, I was trying to think if there would be another difference, but maybe you're right. This is the difference. I mean, there was no validation by the authority that had to validate it, which is central.
Yeah.
It's true.
But people were getting degrees called criminology degrees.
Right. But say an example, if you would go to an exam as a civil servant or so, this would be no official degree.
Exactly. Yeah.
During all the 90s, we keep doing this Erasmus master. We do this Erasmus master, blah, 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 blah. But it's a master that is not an official degree. I mean, you can put it in your curriculum, but it would not count as an official master.
Exactly. And also because the terminology now with the Bologna system has changed. Because that would have been, now it would be, it's like the postgraduate degree, a master in the sense of a postgraduate. Now it would be a master of second level, which exists in some countries. So everybody going to that master already had a university degree.
Yeah.
You needed to have one, no?
Yeah.
To enter the master. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. But say when the masters became official, then many people said, oh, can we try to, because of course to have the
Validate.
official, yes, it's better,
And that it was possible to validate
No,
it.
no, it was very difficult because it was like, no, but now the official master has the subjects and it takes so many hours and, so no, it was very difficult.
Yeah, it's very regulated. It's not at all the case in other countries that you have these classes must be taught and with this number of hours. It's very centrally regulated.
A master, it's 60 ECTS.
Yeah, that is the same in Belgium. I mean, we have this system of accreditation. So basically, there is quality control, which changed over the years, but you had to prove that you were giving all these courses, that you were correcting exams, and there was this visitation commission. So you could give your degrees, but if people came to check whether you were doing right, you could lose your ability to provide a master's because of the judgment of a team of experts.
It's the same Lieven in Spain. It's exactly the same.
And I think it got formalized after Bologna. It was a very important, especially with regard to the internationalization and Erasmus as well.
They need to be homogeneous. That's also
exactly.
Yeah.
I know because I did Erasmus for a couple of years, and we have many students going to Spain. So
yeah. But even in Spain, there is sometimes a difficulty because if I understand correctly, in Belgium, you have 3+2.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas we have 4+1.
Yeah. But we have tried to be flexible because otherwise nobody wants to go to another
country.
Same.
It's the same. Yeah.
We always try to find practical solutions.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Elena, which is funny in Spain, is that you before going to 4+1, you had 3+2. So instead, when the change was made, there was this diploma, no, and the license.
I'm not sure we had 3+2 because so all the 90s, as we say, you are getting criminology as an optional subject in law, as a master, or as what they called a second degree study. That's what you think it's 3+1, but it wasn't a 3+1. It was that people that had already studied something could do 2 years of criminology. That's, for example, Antonia, Mark, all those students, they are. So as you see, there's criminology establishing itself as an undergraduate study.
Yeah, and some of them did in the University of Barcelona, they did a 3 years diploma.
Okay, that also might be. That's when criminology is not official, and then they're doing it as estudio propio. As so many people did our master. I mean, our master began in, I always have to check it in the web because I really can't remember. And I think our master has been teaching for 30 years now.
Yeah, it's incredible. And at that time, when you did it in combination with other universities, the diploma was a common diploma of the different universities?
I would think not. I would think the diploma was from each university, but it said, this is an Erasmus master done with all those universities. But the diploma is always from the university.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, the students were somehow obliged to go to the different places, the different universities, no?
Okay, it is true. But in the years I was there, obliged would not describe the atmosphere.
Okay.
Because, it was like, we were all young. And to go every 6 months, 1 week to England, 1 week to Holland, 1 week to, it was, a party.
Because I thought it was 6 months.
No, it was 1 week. We would go, the Common Study Program, it was called.
Yeah.
And we would go 1 week to Middlesex Polytechnic. And we would be there 1 week listening to all those professors argue. Then we would go 1 week to Saarbrücken, But as I say, it was really fun. I mean, at least it was really fun the first 2 years, 2 years after. At one point, maybe it wasn't so fun. I don't know. By that time, there had been this schism between Bergali and Bustos. So we didn't continue with the program.
Ah, what a pity. Ah, because you were on
I
you were
was in
obliged
the
to take sides. Yeah.
yes,
That
I
was an
was.
intellectual schism, different schools, different
Oh,
traditions, or
I don't think it was different schools of thoughts. I think it was more, how can I say, when you're, friends for so long, it's like a piling of
Yeah.
misunderstandings on,
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and things. And that at one point, then something happens that afterwards nobody remembers what it is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just, what makes,
And it has,
no
uh,
more, no more.
yeah,
Yeah, I have asked this several times because I knew about that. It's true, and you don't have to say it. I would say that
Uh,
Bergali had these kind of differences with a lot of people. He was by the end of his life, he was not a man with of many friends.
yeah.
And so maybe there was something also particular. Yeah, he was particularly difficult apparently to work with.
It was difficult, it's true. He
Yeah,
was difficult because he was, very, although he was nice when you were with him, but he had a big temper, and he
yeah,
could be very offensive with the words.
yeah.
So, I mean, it was like, I mean, he said things to different people that you could not say,
Yeah,
So,
that's what everybody says about.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
then at
exactly.
one point, Bustos just said, enough, it's enough. But as I
Yeah,
say, it's not that, oh, then happened. No, it was just like, just like, and
yeah,
this was enough. So then the Erasmus went on in UB,
yeah,
University of Barcelona, but I was in Autónoma with Bustos, so we were like cut off
yeah.
the Erasmus.
Yeah, no, and I discussed with Iñaki and Itu, and he told me that he went because he was with the Bergali team, and he said I couldn't take contact with Elena at that time. It's
Yeah,
terrible from the point of view of science, but okay, that's how it was.
it is. It is. Yeah, yeah, it is. Because although I must say, if my impression is correct, that at the end of this schism, I think, because at one point you wanted to say, are there schools of thought in Spain?
Yeah,
And I think that Spain has managed pretty good. There are many schools of thought. There are some that you would think are more conservative, and some you maybe could call administrative, I'm not sure, liberal, critical, but it has done quite a nice job in that they are all united in the Spanish Society of Criminology.
yeah,
So actually, the only ones that have been, because they wanted to be kept out and have not joined, are the ones in the University of Barcelona. Actually, they have even made it like I don't know, like a trademark that of not going anywhere. I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if they even go on with Erasmus. I met once a professor of the Erasmus master, and they said, "Oh no, but they are not here anymore because we were not critical enough." I thought that was funny.
Now it's quite impressive that because they were supposed to be open, but in practice it's completely the opposite. There is
But
no.
but having said this, I'm sure that they do a good job. You know what I mean? Because I mean, they are very they're very activist. Activist inside prison. Activist in prison, activist with immigration, activist with gender. So it's it's not a group that has chosen to join all the others. This
Yeah,
is true. They academically they have chosen to go apart, but they're activists. I mean, they do all these webs, and I mean, they
yeah,
have an allure for young people because they're really so activist.
yeah,
So I mean, you have this school of thought is also there.
yeah, yeah. But it's true that yeah, they don't even publish in the English speaking journals. I seldom see things from
No,
them. Yeah.
no.
Okay.
I think you have to evaluate them in the activist axis.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I think they're more activist oriented. The chief of the group, the follower of Bergali, actually, he was a lawyer. He is a
Yeah.
lawyer, a prison
He's
lawyer.
also
Yeah.
from Argentina.
Rivera.
Rivera, Iñaki Rivera. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So okay, that's quite interesting. Also because at the University of Barcelona, there is also Santiago Redondo with a different approach.
That's funny. Yeah, that you mentioned it. You see, because I only have in my head law. But you're right. There's Santiago Redondo, Antonio Andres. I mean, there's the psychologist.
Yeah, but they also have a program in criminology, eh?
Do they?
Or am I wrong? I'm not sure about that.
No, I would think that's the program that is in the law faculty.
Ah, okay.
So I think that Santiago, Antonio, in Spain, criminology is occupied by law faculties. Yeah. So all the people from psychology have to go and teach, so to say, into the law criminology program. So I don't think they have a program at all. I think they teach in the criminology law.
So you think that they teach in that program even if they have completely different ideas?
I'm 99%
okay.
sure. For example, it would be interesting to ask Santiago or Antonio Andres is how they relate maybe in the masters, or I think they go to meetings, and sometimes Santiago says something like, oh, we went to a meeting, but I'm sure it's the same program, Marcelo. They are very different, but it's the same program.
Okay, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we arrived there, as you mentioned, for several years. There is a moment at the beginning when we really started discussing. It was at the first meeting of the European Society of Criminology in 2001. At that moment, first, you were at the Autonomous University. There was a license. First, it was a license, a 2 years license that lasted not so long before it started as an undergraduate program. Eh?
That's what I was telling you. That you have to count as when the period when criminology is battling to establish itself. You know, I mean, that was the 2-year program. So the 80s, we begin a group of scholars. The 90s, it gets pushed in different ways. But it's not until the 2008 that you really have the boom explosion of all the undergraduate degrees in Spain.
Yeah.
Okay, so it really takes like 10, 15 years, you know, to get established as, okay, this is an official undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you developed the program because you were at the Autonomous, that you went to the Pompeu Fabra.
Yes, because at that moment, when they see that you can do criminology, all universities want to do criminology. And you can imagine why, because criminology is very attractive. Yeah. I mean, if you put criminology in the market, you will always have enough students, you know. Yeah. So it doesn't matter, even if you would go and tell the students, look, the labor market is terrible. Look, it's very hard to get a job. But if you would get, and all the people from Catalonia, all of us, we just were very cautious, and we just said, okay, 60 positions to study or 80 positions to study, they would get full immediately. 60 positions, 80 positions. If the academics, if we would have said 120 or 150, maybe they would have gone full also, you know. Yeah. But we told the universities, no, only 60, only 80, only 90. But the universities were getting all these students. So the universities said, okay, let's do criminology. So this is when Pompeu Fabra says, let's do criminology. And they say, oh, but we have a problem. We don't have any criminologists. That's why when they contact me and they say, hey, do you want to come to Pompeu Fabra? And I say, sure, I'm coming to Pompeu Fabra. And I come to Pompeu Fabra. And this is 2008. This is when the programs begin.
It's 2008. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And how did you create a program with only one criminologist?
Yeah, well, the question is, how do you sustain the program with only one criminologist? So my situation is the situation for almost all Spain is you have 3 people that are tenured, stable, seniors. Then you have many PhD students, postdoctoral students, you know, you have like 5, 6, 8, okay? And then you have people that we call them associate. It means another thing in English. It's people that are working outside and come to teach the university for a couple of hours. So the situation is far from nice. because you have all those studies in all Spain. In Pompeu Fabra, it's me. In La Autónoma, is José Cid. In Girona, is Daniel Barona. In La UOC, is Tamar. You know, almost in all, there's 1, 2, 3 people.
Yeah.
And the rest, it's like very, very, I mean, when I listen that in Belgium, some departments have 20, 30, you know, you think, what? You know, it's like.
That's, of course, the historical tradition. It started very early. We had the opportunity of the schools of criminology who developed and translated later on as independent programs. You are right about one thing, criminology, it attracts a lot of people. I was wondering, then you must have the same problem. Where do all these people find a job?
Yeah. Actually, it's funny because one of our sociologists did an empirical study, a research, and she found out that 30% get a job related with criminology, which is better than some people thought, 30%, but 70% don't. 70% what they do is they begin another study, they work in whatever they can, they just have a university degree, and well, okay, that's something, you know. But only 30% gets a job related to criminology.
Interesting. I recognize some of these issues. I mean, we did a study once, and indeed, but it seems that after more than 1 year, that percentage increases because people start doing something else and try to find a job, or indeed they do an additional program, because the combination of criminology as a degree with something else seems to be very attractive nowadays.
Yeah. Actually, in Spain, it's quite common that what we have done is law and criminology, because this is a safety net. You know, I mean, if you can't go to some place with criminology, you can go with law. And I'm sure that if you would have psychology and criminology, this would be boom, you know.
Yeah, it booms in Belgium. This is a very popular combination. And do you also, I mean, if people start studying law, they have their degree, then they study criminology, probably they can study criminology in another way. They can, for example, instead of 3 years, 2 years or something.
Yeah, definitely, yes. Although in Spain, the order is the other way around. Because my colleagues here in law, they would say, oh, but now more people go to criminology. And I say, no, but afterwards they come to law. Because they do criminology, and in criminology, they do criminal law, constitutional law, procedure, and they think, oh, so law is fun. You know, and I used to joke with them saying, sure. Now go to private law, you know, financial law.
Imputación objetiva.
But in any case, you know, they begin criminology, and when they finish, they say, law is fun. And then happens what you say. They only have to do 1.5 years, 2 years, and then they have law. But we don't have psychology and criminology, for example. This is an indicator that although psychologists are strong, they are not as strong as lawyers. Yeah. Because or else they would have managed to do psychology and criminology, you know.
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah, but they can't do it. They social work and criminology.
That's also a very popular one in Belgium, and I think in many other countries as well, because they're doing similar jobs. I mean,
of course, I agree. Yes, yeah, and they want to work with the same population.
Exactly.
Yeah, but here in Spain, social work neither. I mean, actually, the only thing that is together is law and criminology.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, what they call the double degrees.
Right.
It's not a major and a minor, but really double degree. Okay.
They call it double degree. Yeah.
And what happens with the PhDs?
There's two routes. The traditional one in the rest of Spain is once you finish a PhD, you get a position in the university. That's the traditional one. So in the rest of Spain, more or less, you can still find this model. Pompeu Fabra gets a lot of people to the PhD. So here we are more in the modern world, so to say. So here, when you finish your PhD, all you get is congratulations, you've done your PhD. Now you have to go to another university, to the government, abroad. I mean, you're not going to get a position because you've done a PhD.
Yeah.
So here, for example, we've had many PhDs each year since I came here in 2008. Since 2014, we've had one PhD each year in criminology. But I mean, at the most, we're going to keep one, at the most.
Yeah.
Because this relates again to we don't have positions, and because we don't have positions, then it's very difficult to offer young people the possibility of staying, you know.
And this is a PhD in law, orientation, criminology, or
In
it's
law.
really criminology?
In law.
Yeah.
In law. No, the PhD is in law.
Yeah.
But, you know, but I don't know in Switzerland or Belgium, but here the PhD actually only means that you're going to take a class in methodology the first term, and afterwards you're going to be left by yours.
In Switzerland, it's also there is a trend to go towards real PhD schools, but we have introduced this summer school to which we have it again this year. So you have to send us your students, and one day you should come also.
Okay.
But it's very short, and mainly it's you have to do it, and your supervisor is there. But we have positions, you know, we have like 2 positions per professor of assistants who work 50% as assistants and 50% as they do their PhD. So it's a very particular position. Having been in both countries, it's much easier in Switzerland to do research for a professor with this support that you immediately have from the university.
Here in Pompeu Fabra, you would have support to do your PhD. What is upsetting for the people is that after you do your PhD, right, you really have to go out.
Yeah,
this is because the model in the rest of Spain, I mean, I was talking this with somebody from Oxford, and he said, no, of course we don't have this problem, because everybody that comes to Oxford know they're going to go away.
Yeah.
But in Spain, because you had the model of everybody that does a PhD is going to get a position, then this other model of, no, it's the contrary. You know, you can do your PhD, but you're not going to get a position in the university. Then this is very hard. It's very, you know, because,
I agree. It's very hard. And this is a big change, because if you look at the 1980s and 90s, I remember my own professors, actually, they only started thinking of hiring a new assistant when they were kind of like almost retiring, because they needed a new assistant who could then obtain a PhD and become the new professor. That's the good old days. I mean, the old days doesn't mean the good old days, but nowadays all universities stress more PhDs, and an increasing number of scholars are disappointed. While I think that they are of additional value once they have obtained the PhD, then they can be really collaborators. So the postdoc, this is something that's missing in Belgium. I don't know how about Spain, but at the postdoc level, this is a big gap between position as a professor and the PhD. This is, I mean, where you can get the most out of them, because they're highly qualified. They have shown that they can do research.
Here, as I say, I mean, Pompeu Fabra is quite exceptional in this, because it's very, you know, I mean, very modern, or I don't know. But in any case, in Pompeu Fabra, again, the difficulty would not even be postdoc. So if you, Lieven or Marcelo, if you have anybody that you say, oh, we have a postdoc and he doesn't have a job, I'll tell him to come.
Okay.
And yes, you know, and most often we can offer him. The problem begins when this poor man, poor woman who has been here with a postdoc and say, and what are the chances of staying here? And I have to tell him, nil. There are no chances, you know, because this is the main problem in Spain. All the professors, we're all getting very old, but extremely old. The average is like 56. The average.
Elena, don't you think that this is also because many universities, I mean, the end of the dictatorship in
Oh,
77, let's say the first elections, it meant that there was a sort of renewal of the professors, and then very
that might
young,
be true. That might be true. So they are not getting old until now.
yeah, they enter all together
Yeah, this is
in
true. But on the other hand, don't you think that it also reflects that things are changing in the sense of, if I am a businessman
yeah,
and I think, okay, I do numbers,
yeah,
it's obviously the tenure people are incredibly expensive.
yeah,
I can get 5 associate professors, which will do
yeah,
5 courses, and
yeah,
they cost my salary. So,
yeah,
I mean, I agree what you say that it's professors all got their tenures in the 80s. But on the other hand, it has to do with this restructuring of the university somehow. It's the, we are very expensive.
yeah. And also the fact that university, I mean, they talk about the democratization of
Yeah,
university, which is a way of labeling it, but it means that the percentage of young Spanish people that go to university is very high. I mean, Switzerland,
yeah,
we have a very, I think, one of the lowest rates in Europe. At the same time, we have an unemployment rate of 3 or 4%, very low. So
yeah,
I think that a lot of people go to university, and there is also some pressure, from what I remember, about how many finish their studies. There is some pressure
yeah,
about not having a lot of people being rejected, and this
yeah.
I don't think, I'm not sure it's a good. I'm sure it's, in my opinion, it's not a good development, because
Yeah.
then you have to add more studies, and then you have the bachelor and then the undergraduate and then the master and then another master. So I think there is something wrong there in the way this is perceived.
But I think you're right, because many times before I would, be upset because X% of the students didn't care too much for the class and all this. But now I just assume that the university does a social function, what you say about, the unemployment for young people. I mean, I have an X% of people that if they were employed in Switzerland, they would not be sitting in my class.
Yeah,
So I have just come to accept this. I mean, I know there's 20-30% that are there because they don't have a good employment. If they had a good employment, they wouldn't be in the university.
yeah,
Okay, I just thank them for not being too noisy in the class. And
yeah. I mean, of
okay,
course, it's more charming to say I'm a university student that I am an
unemployed,
unemployed person. Yeah,
and in the meantime, also, if you're a parent, wouldn't you
yeah,
say so? In the meantime, of course, go study
yeah,
something. You
exactly.
know?
No, I was surprised when a couple of years I taught one class in the bachelor level at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. And I was surprised because people were talking in class, and I never had this in Switzerland. I teach a class, one class for the undergraduate first year of forensic sciences. I have 250 people. Nobody's talking. I'm
Yeah.
teaching there with the 250 plus 15 criminology, and nobody's talking. And I was surprised at the autonomous. I had to stop the class and say, "What's going on here? Why are you talking?" I mean,
Yeah.
and there
Yeah.
was this idea of, no, they have to be there. You have to check the list. And I said, this is an infantilization of the system. I
Yeah.
said, if you don't want to be there, go out. Get
Yeah.
out of the class. I don't bother. I don't mind. But this was a huge difference, Elena. A
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. Me, as I say, at the beginning of my career, I
Yeah.
also tried to, convince all the classroom. But now,
Yeah.
as I say, I have come to accept that, I speak for the first rows. The others, as I say, if they're there, they're welcome. If they're not there, it's okay.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. I mean, that's what we say. Oh, I don't have unemployment. I'm going to study something. What can I do? Oh, criminology. This sounds fun. Okay, so
Let's go.
here you are.
Yeah.
Okay,
No,
so that's criminology is in all Spain since 2008. Okay,
Yeah,
since 2008,
exactly.
almost all the universities have criminology. Almost, not all, but almost.
Yeah,
Do you want to move a little bit into research?
yeah. Let's go to research. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because I mean that every university has research. It's still very small. Wouldn't you agree, Marcelo? It's still very slow, very small, very. And I have thought about it, why this is so. And okay, for one, it's again, if there's no tenure people, nobody does research, very little money, very little money. Spain also is a country of formal law. You know, what's research? What do you mean by research? You know, it's difficult even to understand what do you want to research? You know, I mean, you know, methodology. Well, I buy some books and I go to a library and I read. That's what you do, you know. So I mean, there are all those reasons why I thought, oh, also I wanted to add also a political reason is that we also don't have data. I mean, if you're in England, in UK, or maybe in Belgium is the same, or certainly in US, you have all these data. But in Spain, only recently have you become to get some data. So, you know, so there's many factors that contribute to say, oh, but Spain is not still, we are on the top in teaching, but we're not in the top in research. And I think it's a little bit all these reasons. Okay, so this is research. Research,
Yeah, but
don't you agree that research is very weak in Spain?
No, but exactly what you said, the fact that you say to the criminal lawyers research, investigación, and they don't understand what you're talking about. This is something that I also felt it sometimes when I discuss with some colleagues also from sometimes from Argentina, especially if they come from criminal law. The concept of research, empirical research, is quite different. And
it's very different. We have the same issue in Belgium, and I must say that one way we try to solve the problem is to slowly but surely introduce also some basic methodology classes to law students, but most of them were skeptical in the beginning because they thought, I'm going to be a lawyer, why do I need some statistics, or why do I need to learn how to interview people? I mean, but it's slowly changing. I mean, that's probably the big difference between criminal law and criminology.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, this was one argument. When we created the undergraduate degrees, I was asked to do a little bit comparative studies. And I brought René from Rotterdam, you know, René van Zwanningen.
Yeah.
And he was asked, why do you have an undergraduate degree in criminology instead of doing something afterwards? And I remember his answer was like, there is no way you can turn a lawyer into a criminologist once he has done 4 years of law. You know, because, you know, it's this thing, what you say. I mean, the lawyer is very difficult for him to understand methodology. What is research? What's a research question? You know, your field work. Are you going to do field work? I mean, this doesn't even translate good in Spanish. Field work. Un trabajo de campo. ¿En qué campo?
¿En qué campo
voy a hacer el trabajo?
Yeah, because
you know, it's like, you know, so it's very difficult coming from law. To go into, you know, I mean.
It's true that the translations, you're fully right, because campo usually refers to the place where you grow things, you know, the campos of La Pampa.
¿A qué campo voy a ir? Claro, of course, you know, I mean, so this is, research is weak. I wanted to tell you, by the way, I forgot an idea that I think that I should mention. Because there's so many undergraduate degrees and so much difficulty of staying in the university, a discussion in Spain that I don't think you have in your countries is that criminology should only be taught by criminologists. So now you have this pressure of, but he's not a criminologist, but he's not a criminologist. Instead of, what are you saying? I mean, the most known criminologists in the world, I'm not sure if they have studied criminology, if they are criminologists.
All the theories were developed by non-criminologists.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think this is an effect of the Bologna reform, because I remember when I was a student, I was also before the Bologna reform. Then we had many courses which were very, very relevant to criminologists, which were taught by, sociologists, biologists, psychologists, geographers, whatever.
Whatever.
But criminology is a field where you integrate things. So, and then people started to think about, we need to organize everything ourselves, and no more service education, and so that became kind of a game changer. And nowadays we're coming back and we see that we made the wrong decision back then in 2004, because you need other people from other fields to explain their view on crime and the reaction towards crime, because otherwise, you just forget important points of view. So
and many times, for example, gender violence is a very hot issue in Spain, since many years, 2000 also, more or less. So it's like at one point there was like, I didn't read any more of it because I had read everything there was, So now a few weeks ago, I read a paper by an anthropologist. I think she's an anthropologist. And I thought, wow, this is new. And I'm sure this is new because she's an anthropologist.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I really fear this trend of criminology only by criminologists, because it will be totally closed.
And I see two problems there. Maybe because I thought about this, because I followed this discussion. First, in general terms, I think this is something like the new rich syndrome, the person who gets rich and now everything is that. So now I am a criminologist, and so I am the criminologist and not you, not the one to. But the problem is that, as we discussed before, all these criminologists had one class, had one professor of criminology, and then professors of different fields. So it's not that they have the best. It's not that if you go maybe to Cambridge, to Oxford, or an American university, then maybe you have more people that have this background. But I'm not sure about the qualifications to say, okay, now I am a real criminologist, I master everything, and only I can teach. And I think so. This on one side. This is, I think, is also due to the fact that Spain is a very corporativist country. For example, there was this federation of associations of criminologists, the FASE, which existed before the studies were official. When I arrived to Spain, this was a major issue. The FASE is here, Federation of Associations of Criminologists of Spain, and these were all based in these non-official degrees, and they had a lot of power. And so, okay, I understand that working for the public service, a lot of people work for the public service in Spain, so you need these lobbies to do pressure, but it can lead to what you're saying now, that it becomes a closed thing. And I have the impression, and then I will shut up, but it's not because you do a little bit of medicine and a little bit of psychology and a bit of philosophy and sociology that you are a multidisciplinary person, because sometimes you work like in separate fields. You need someone to put all this together, and I'm not sure that everyone can do that, So I fully agree with what you're saying, and I follow this discussion. They don't want the ones that have published in criminology for 20 years. They don't want them to call themselves criminologists. And we talk about this in the Preside Criminology in the book, saying that for people that are, let's say, under 50 in Switzerland, you could ask, okay, if you want to be called a criminologist, maybe you had to study criminology. But for the other ones, it's completely stupid, because it was not possible to be a criminologist. And in Spain, it's even younger, I think.
Yeah. Also, what I try to tell them, this is not only my idea, because this was developed with many criminologists. It's like, what we have to do, I try to tell them, is you have to ask and work in the marketplace that we need somebody that does this, 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 and this, and this. Yeah. And then it doesn't matter if she's a criminologist, a psychologist, so what do you want her to teach? And she teaches, or what do you want her to do? In that way, I think you will allow criminologists not to be excluded, but it will be in a different way than to the corporativist that you're saying, because the criminologists, they find themselves following. They say, oh, but they asked for a lawyer, they asked for a psychologist, so we want them to ask for a criminologist.
Exactly.
Is what you say of the new rich, and only a criminologist.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, no, we should really try to move a little bit the model. And it's absurd to say, oh, to teach in criminology, you have to be criminologist. Tell them you have to teach methods. Okay, whoever it is, political science, psychologist, criminal, I don't care, But it's, this is now a big discussion in the teaching.
And I have one question I wanted to ask. I have two, but let's start with this one. You mentioned gender-based violence. I remember when I first started discussing with persons working in gender-based violence, which are majority, 90% are women, they were abolitionists.
Really?
I have the impression that in the 80s.
That's funny that you mentioned this, because you know that in Spain, the major criticism against feminists is that they're punitivists.
Yeah, exactly. But this is, I mean, when you studied with the critical criminologist, the trend was towards abolitionism.
I agree.
And there was a huge, there was a feminist position there. So, but the thing is, that is my point, that now this has changed, or these persons are not visible. Camille Paglia is not visible, for example. I even heard that she was threatened sometimes. But what happened there?
No, I agree, because the first step is that there was this punitiveness as more or less across all the world, right? I mean, this culture of control, Garland.
Yeah.
When does Garland publish? 2000, 2001?
Yeah.
So that's more or less the same in Spain. So this also affects feminism. So then, although you're right that all the feminism in the 90s is leftist and abolitionist, but in the 2000s, the feminists begin to be punitive. And the ones that reach the power in the Socialist Party, mainly, it's very difficult for them to be able to say that they are not for increased penalties.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. For example, now we've had a new law, and this new law has been done by the leftist party, Socialist and Podemos. And as a result of this new law, some sexual violence has not gone out of prison, but they have gone from 28 years to 27 years. This is a scandal. This is a scandal. I assure you that I was thinking today of writing a paper, because from 28 to 27 years, this is a scandal, because the opposition says they are releasing the rapist. But releasing means they have gone 1 year down, from 10 years to 9, from 28 to 27. But you see the contradiction. I mean, it's very difficult for all those leftist women to say, yes, we want 1 year less.
I fully understand you. And I think that you should write it, because if we write them, we will be, you saw what happened. I followed that debate. So the court said, okay, this is the law that you made. And they were accused of interpreting the law as machist, patriarchal. So if we do it, if Lieven and I write about that, these are the...
I agree. But on the other hand, as I also say, there's no way that the feminists can win in this debate, because if the punishments are high, they get accused of being punitive.
Yeah.
If the punishments are lowered, then they get accused of releasing the rapist. Yeah. There's no way that this debate can be won. I mean, I can't write it because I don't know a way out. I mean, if I think of some way out, I would write it, but there's no way out. It's very difficult debate.
Yeah, but I wanted to ask you about that, because I saw this change from abolitionism to punitivism, but I understand the dilemma there. So thank you.
It changes when the society begins to say, they have to be in prison. I mean, this is the major change when you wanted to say how crime has changed in your country, and the major change. But the major change is exactly as it happened in many places, that in Spain, I remember that there was an author, I can't remember her name, but the paper was called Spain is Different. Imagine, it was like, this man that said that prison was always stable, that the prison rates were always stable, and 1 year after they began to increase.
Yeah, this is Blumstein in the
right,
US.
Blumstein,
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Right. So this woman writes this paper and it says Spain is different, because she says that crimes is not a political issue, and that people are not punitive in Spain. And that here people tends to be leftist and with the underdog. And all this is true. But it all changed in the 2000. It all changed with Garland. I mean, people begin to be more punitive, or at least that's, students. You notice it in your students. I mean, victims, as Cohen would say, victims are everywhere. So the atmosphere changed. And feminism had to change with the atmosphere, because, as I say, it's very difficult. It became a sign of, are you taking this problem seriously? Is how many years of prison are you going to put? If you only put 27 years of prison, it means you're not taking it seriously.
Yeah, no, it's incredible, Elena. And I'm surprised because all the people I relate to, Chomsky is also saying this is not what we were fighting for in the 70s. We were not fighting for prohibiting the people that think in a different way to talk. That was never. And then this changed, and I saw it and you too, in our lifetime.
You see it with your students. I mean, I tend to go into class and, I'm very open in stating what I think and all this. And I realize all of a sudden that I'm almost alone. I mean, that they are all like, what? I mean, for example, teaching prison, and you say, look how bad prison is, and look how dirty, and look how destructive. And, the reaction is, yeah, how it should be. And then you have to whoop, 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 quickly change and say, okay, you can't assume they are with you. Yeah. You can't assume it.
And this is a major change, because they used to be with you.
Of course. Okay, I always have to start saying, it's not all homicide, it's not all rape. Maybe you have done some traffic offense, or, some drug offense, or some, I always have to put offenses that they relate to.
Yeah.
If you have faked some signature, or
downloaded music,
or in a political demonstration, I have to put things that they relate. And then I say, okay, so then you could end up in prison. But you really have to do this a step.
Yeah. Do you think that this is perhaps the profile of the persons who choose to study criminology is different from those who decide to study sociology or any other social science like social work?
Might be. Although I remember discussing with Cohen, I always said that criminology was very leftist and progressive, and he would always tell me, I don't know from where you got this idea. Because for him, criminology in the States was always more law enforcement.
Yeah. This is an interesting difference, because that maybe we should discuss about it, because, or try to not discuss, maybe try to research about it.
Think of criminology in John Jay, for example, in New York.
Yeah.
That's criminology is enforcement.
Yeah. You know that we have a test here in Switzerland. It's called smartvote.ch. And this is, each time there is a federal votation, you know that we vote quite often in Switzerland, not only elections, but we decide on things. And there is a test that you can take, the deluxe test. It's like 70 questions about everything, about your opinion on immigration policy and this. And then it gives you your position in a four axis, which is left, right, liberal, conservative.
Yeah.
And this would be interesting to do it with the students in an anonymous way, of course, and see the difference, between law and social sciences and maybe criminology. Perhaps if you start early criminology, you get more people that are not so to the left than if you get them later. Also, a big difference that I see now is, for example, 90% of my students are women. I get only for 50 students, if I get 5 or 6 men, that is the maximum. I don't know how it is when you start at the undergraduate level. In Switzerland, it's only a master.
Here, there's more. Not majority is women, but maybe there would be 30% of men. I had exam today, so I was able to look at them. 30%. Also because many of them want to be police.
Okay. Also, something that changed in Switzerland is we used to have people from law, and now we get people from psychology. The typical profile is a woman who studied psychology currently. But this is because we are at the master level. Maybe it would be different.
That's different at the bachelor level. But we lose more than 60%. I mean, first bachelor year, people don't know what to choose. And then, so the first bachelor year is not the best way to look at your students. But I want to add something on the interesting discussion about do our students change, have the profiles on the political spectrum from conservative to progressive and left to right changed? I wouldn't talk in terms of left to right, but conservative progressive is maybe a much more convenient way of talking about it on the cultural, social, and economic level. There is an interesting study by the American Democrat psychologist Jonathan Haidt, and I tried to conduct some surveys among university students in Ghent. Social scientists are in general more progressive as an average, but there's a lot of variation everywhere. We should never forget that when we talk about differences, we talk about group differences, and there's a lot of variation. So law students are on average more conservative than criminology students and sociology students. Social work students are probably most left-winged. The hard sciences, for example, are much more, engineers and so on, much more right-wing and conservative. But these are averages, and in each and every group you see some kind of strong variation around this mean, but the group means are really different. The major conclusion that social sciences are much more leftist is correct, but that doesn't mean that there's no diversity in opinions. I mean, so if you talk about left, you have to make the distinction between that's what Steven Pinker says, and I agree with him, the regressive left and the progressive left. And the regressive are the ones that don't want any change and are the ones who criticize everybody else for not being the same. So they are intolerant towards the other. And the progressive left wings are those who want social reform but are open for discussion. Of course, I simplify things, but that's an interesting way of thinking about what's going on. And now, in general, the political climate is so that those who are in the middle implode because of this polarization at both the left and the right. I remark this in my classes as well. So some people nowadays sometimes talk about topics which I wouldn't have dared talk about 20 years ago as a student. So like indeed what you said about punitiveness and so on, that's what prisons are for. This is an indication of that things change, but it doesn't mean that the whole group has moved to the right. That's fortunately it's just variation.
No, I agree. Not only I wanted to add, Lieven, that to make things complicated, a little bit more complicated, it's sometimes we are not sure what a progressive would look like.
Exactly.
In our topic, I mean, because it's like, sometimes I have some very progressive friends, and then they don't see anything wrong with prisons. It takes me a lot of time to say, well, but maybe alternative, what, and we all know regressive left that is very authoritarian.
Exactly.
Now, it's what we say in Spain now. We have two leftist parties in the government, and those poor things. I mean, they really cannot do any other penal policy than the conservatives, because this is very difficult to what is a progressive penal policy.
Exactly.
It is, how does it look like? How does it look like? I mean, needless to say that then you have problems in enforcing it and money and this and that, but already at the first level, how does it look like? It's very complicated. I mean, being policy advisor is very difficult.
It has many faces, but that's I guess that's going to be a topic which is going to grow because of the complicated situation we're in now. So,
but in any case, it's a very interesting discussion.
Because we finished my life now. I realize we finished my life in 2008.
Yeah, exactly. What happened later? Yeah. What?
I still need to tell you.
Yeah, but
I'm joking.
No, but
it's true. It's true. I mean, we didn't speak of Jane Jacobs.
But maybe you should say something about Jacobs, because we cannot leave him outside.
No. Okay, Jacobs. I'll just say the anecdote. I went to New York with my son, and Jacobs took me to the beach, mainly because I had a little boy. So he takes me to the beach, and he's working on criminal records. And he begins to say how everybody should know criminal records. And I say, no, this is terrible. No. He said, what? Do you employ a babysitter without checking her criminal records? And I said, of course I employ a babysitter without checking her criminal records. What do you mean this? And he's a very, enthusiastic person and discussing. So then he says, we have to do a paper together. I can't understand. Or you are crazy or I am crazy. But somebody's crazy in this meeting, So that's Jacobs. So that's how.
But that is a whole line of investigation that you started, and that is followed by some of the persons who did the PhD with you now.
Yeah. I worked 10 years in criminal records.
10 years already.
Yeah, but from going to the beach, I was going to the beach with my son, and I end up with 10 years working criminal records with Jacobs, because he was very much,
And how did you get in touch with him?
When I got my scholarship in Santa Barbara, I was a poor student, and I couldn't go to New York. So I didn't go to New York. So then, many years later, I applied for another scholarship to New York. And my first contact is David Greenberg. Do you know the name of David?
Yeah. It's
Crime and Capitalism. Greenberg is quantitative. I mean, leftist and quantitative criminology. In any case, I get to New York, to NYU through Greenberg and then Jacobs. And Garland is the year he arrived to NYU. So I'm there the year that Garland arrived. Okay. I can say that I was in his office before he became before he became Garland.
Okay. But
we have to stop, or else.
It's very nice, and we will get back. We have to. Okay. We are doing because we really enjoy it. Also, it's a way of discovering things that you would never. Because how many times have we dinner together, lunch together, coffee together? And some of these things we never talk about it. It's good to have a line of discussion to write down some things, because then you get to places where you usually do not go.
Because usually when we have dinner, we speak of the day before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And then the day before is already very interesting. And if we spoke of the day before, we would have 2 more hours.
Exactly.
But then we don't get to the years before.
Yeah, that is why I still have the messy shirt, because it's 48 hours only.
Still a lot to talk about.
I'm surprised you have voice.
It was terrible. It was terrible.
Okay.
Okay, Elena, thank you very, very much.
No, thank you. It was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
the same.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye, guys.
Thank you for following Lieven and Marcelo's Criminology podcast. This podcast is edited by Eduardo Coco from the University of Lausanne. Our theme song is Seagull's Night, Noche de Gaviotas, composed by Gustavo Cantero, arranged by Tato Germano, and played by Tato and Gustavo with the voices of Sasha Conte and Alejandro Turco Gujot. Your hosts are Lieven Pauwels from Ghent University, Belgium, and Marcelo Evi from the University of Lausanne, Switzerland. Cheers, and see you soon.